Now you guys have been craving some progress on the rat rod build. I'm really trying not to rush. I've been in here a handful of times throughout the week trying to brainstorm ideas to make this all work. I'm just using what I've got laying around. So I think I've finally figured out my rear suspension, and we're going to kind of pick up here where I left off. Okay, so what we're looking at here is, right now I've got a 2-link with a panhard bar, and that works except for my bottom links are hinged. If I had a way to mount a solid mount to both screw holes to a hinged end on this side, then that's all I would need. That's very similar to what we have on the semi trucks and stuff that I work on every day. But I've been sitting around thinking, and I just can't come up with a good way to hard mount the rod end to the axle. So I'm going to kind of take a cue from RC 4-wheel drive's 3-link, and I'm just going to run a 3-link with a panhard bar. So right now it's hinged on the bottoms, and then I've got this rod across the back onto the chassis, but it still gives me flex that way. So I need one more link. Where did I put that? Right here. Coming from the top to keep the pinion set, and it still needs to be able to move up and down. So let me flip it around here and show you kind of what else I've got. Alright, so this is the panhard setup. Now what I've used is a Jalon 2 panhard bar mount. I've only got one screw in it so far. I got to drill the other hole out, and I've just found, luckily, a rod that was the right length, and I've used the spacer to mount it to this hole on the other side, which could either be your shock mount or whatever. I've got these bottom ones here, hoping I can use those for shock mounts. I may still be able to use the front of that for a shock mount. I still hadn't thought that far ahead yet. I'm just trying to figure out the geometry. So what this is a tracking rod. That's one of the things that I do with my job every day, is put tracking rods in, measure it. Some trucks you gotta measure it and get it precise. It basically, you're tracking your where your tires are in relation to your frame rails. So it's gonna keep the axle centered in the frame. Like I said, without the 3rd link, I've still got pitch, but what this does is prevent it from moving side to side. So, and it does cause this isn't a rock crawler, so you know, I'm not worried about, like, if you lifted a Jalon 2, you notice that your axle moves over to one side on the front with the 3-link. So I'm not too worried about that with this, because it's not going to have a whole lot of travel. But if I pick up on it, it will move a little bit to the side. But this is going to be a very low slung build. It's not going to have a whole lot of flex or anything. It's not supposed to. This suspension is geared more towards traction. It's supposed to stay put and keep the tires on the ground so you can haul butt. So this is where I'm at right now. I'm going to go ahead, I'll pull you around here, drill this other hole out. Alright, so I got the other screw in the panhard. So that's all in there good. Now I've mocked up my Driveline. I've got the transmission roughly where I think it's going to be. I can't say for sure yet, because I haven't got to the front of the rig yet. But you can see the pinion angle. It's going to be hard to mess up, since this isn't a big, not going to be a lot of travel. I don't want it up like that. I want it as straight as possible. This is going to be up some. I don't know how high my ride height's going to be yet. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, but I'm shooting for maybe a little more than 1/4 of an inch, and that right there is perfectly straight. So I'm going to lower it back down, and now I'm going to look at where I need to mount my 3rd rod here, and I don't have a clue yet how I'm going to do this. I'm going to mount it crisscross. I've got to come up with some kind of mount off of the frame. It needs to be higher than the bottom 2, but not too far. I can't do too much or it'll get in the way of the interior, so it's going to have to be down pretty close to the frame. So I'm going to tinker with some metal here and see what I can come up with. Alright guys, that took a little bit of thinking. So I've got it in. I've got the transmission mocked up again with the Driveline. I flipped my center cross member, so I had the flat side up, and I drilled some holes in it. It's not the best looking work. The width of the holes, this is a 4-link mount from RC 4-wheel drive, just like what I've got on the axles back here. And I just mounted it upside down, and it gave me a good mounting point. I've got a nut on the front one. The back one is just kind of wedged between the edge of the metal, and it's janky. It's a rat rod. It's supposed to be sketchy, so that's the theme. That's what we're rolling with. I went ahead and mocked up a rear cross member, put some scale bolts in it. I just used some brake line. It's gonna have to be brazed in, but for now I just needed something to keep the width of the rails in the back. It's pretty well centered. I'm not measuring anything, even though a caliper is laying out here. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. What's next? Oh, I never did really talk to you about the lower links. Let me show you what I did down here. It's pretty sketchy too. I just ran some long bolts, some long hardware through both sections of frame rail where I already had a screw hole or a hole drilled and mounted both chassis halves together, and I put a couple of spacers, mounted my rod, and put a nut. Simple as that. Like I said, this isn't going to be a rock crawler. If you had a hardcore crawler or something, that probably would bend. It wouldn't work. This isn't going to flex. It isn't going to travel, and honestly, it's probably not going to have a whole lot of torque through it. I'm not going to throw some crazy brushless system on here. I'm not trying to set a land speed record with it. I just want it to look like a land speed car. Alright, so here's a look at it from the back. I'm just going to pick up on it. Everything stays put. Like I said, it tracks a little side to side. I'll show you from the top. Alright, here's kind of a top view. Pinion angle stays good. It'll never be that high, so don't have to worry about that. I'll show you from the side. Alright. So you can see it does everything it's supposed to do. I guess the next step, start thinking about shocks. Alright guys, I think I'm going to have to wrap this one up here. I had some ideas for shocks. Things aren't exactly panning out. I've got plenty of room. I just test fit the body. I've got, zoom me out a little more, I've got room up to at least 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches above where the rails are inside the body. So my original plan, I bought some of these. These are the new RC 4-wheel drive scale shocks from the Jalon 2 1/18 scale. Now these are perfect size for a rat rod. They look perfect. They look like a 1/10 scale actual shock, and I'm afraid they're going to be completely useless. There are a spring, but I don't think they could handle the weight and the torque of the rear end. And the biggest problem that I didn't plan for, the eyes on them are what is everything standard, 2.5 to 3 millimeter, and these are tiny. Like, I think these are 2 millimeter and everything else is 3, if I'm right. It's late, I may be wrong. So that gives me a problem because all of my holes in my axle are the standard size, the 3 millimeter, and yeah, I've got nothing. I haven't come up with a way to adapt it yet. Another option, I've got lots of RC 4-wheel drive shocks laying around. I had it upside down. I do have room for something like this, because again, we're sitting on the frame. Ride height is going to be somewhere around there, and with like a Jalon 2 hoop, might be able to work something out. Also, I have these. I have no clue what they're from. They're a touring car shock. I think they would be the perfect length, but they're really fat. So I'm going to have to shim them away from the axle and away from the frame. Let me show you another angle. Alright, so these are so fat that they'll have to be moved away from the axle and kept pretty far away from the chassis or the frame rail. They'll fit. I do have the way the body is, it will cover well, there's something to point with. It comes all the way out to about here on the axle. So it's almost as wide as the center of the bruiser frame back. So only that much of the axle will be sticking out. Maybe a little less. I'll have to do some rechecking here. So I think my rear tire problem I was having in the beginning, all I got to do is flip the bead locks around, and that should buy me enough clearance to get those massive tires outside that wide body. Yeah, we'll have to do some more brainstorming on that. I still haven't even really thought about how I'm going to mount the transmission. I've got these mounts I think I can flip down. Unfortunately, here on the cross member, it's only threaded on top where I've got it sitting on this square, so I may have to come up with some kind of mount that mounts to this and then clamps it down there. If you remember my original idea, I want the transmission exposed in the interior. It's just kind of a rat rod thing I like. It's just going to take some more engineering. So let me get a mock up here with the body and show you before I go. Now you can see I've got to do some trimming on the body now to allow the axle up where it needs to be. And basically I'm just going to be channeling the body onto the frame just like you would a real rat rod, also known as a body drop. So still a long way to go, guys. But let me pull this off of here so you can see it. It's pretty in-depth suspension. It's pretty cool. I'm excited about it. But anyways, that's where I'm gonna leave you. You guys stay tuned for more. Be sure to follow along on Instagram and like, subscribe, and share. And see you in the next video.